if you're still analyzing Dallas real estate the way you did 5 years ago, you're already behind, because 6 things that used to be true about this market just aren't anymore. The numbers, they don't mean what they used to. The incentives don't mean what they used to. And what you think you can afford, all right, that's changed too. The first one might surprise you because it changes how we define value altogether. It is no longer about price per square foot, all right? That metric is outdated. It's about price per livability. Like, how much is it going to cost me to live there? I remember when we were buying our first house, like, I would look at the MLS printouts and focus completely on the price and how much house I could get for that price. Like, basically it was all about price per square foot. Like, I would think, okay, this one's 2,200 square foot, that one's 2,600 square foot for the same price. So obviously, that's the better deal. And then I would compare things like the condition and the flooring and how the house was configured, how usable the space was, what the yard was like, okay, all of that. And I would factor all of that into the price I would be paying. Well, guess what? That formula, it doesn't work anymore. Like, price and paying back your mortgage is only one part of what your home is going to cost you. These days, Dallas adds layer upon layer of extra costs, such as HOAs and PIDs and MUDs and MMDs. It all started with HOAs, all right? The Fort Worth Star-Telegram explains how when it comes to HOAs, in 1965, there were only about 500. By 2015, there were nearly 350,000. All right, so that is a crazy increase in HOAs. Then came the rise of the master planned community, and that changed everything. I mean, think about how different neighborhoods are today. Master planned communities are everywhere. And in Dallas, that's when the market really started to shift. Now, the city isn't the one who owns the pools and the parks. It's the community itself, and someone has to pay for that. New Home Source describes how living in a master planned community often means getting more bang for your HOA buck, thanks to fantastic features and amenity packages. And the sky's the limit here in Dallas. You have these master planned communities that have pools and playgrounds, of course, but you'll find ones with lazy rivers, walking trails, water slides, lagoons with white sand beaches, community gardens, all right? But let's be honest, it even goes like way beyond that these days. You'll find food trucks, planned events, and even activity directors, okay? It's gotten to where it's like living on a cruise ship. The thing is that someone has to pay for all this. And now enter your PIDs, okay? Public Improvement Districts. Now we have an entity imposing a tax on individual houses. The best way to describe a PID is a defined geographic area established to provide improvements or maintenance within that area. And this could be things like sidewalks or roads, security, street lighting, and water facilities. But more commonly, it's gonna be your bells and whistles, all right? We're talking the lazy rivers, the lagoons, the giant clubhouses, fitness centers, all right, all of that. These PIDs are seriously expensive, and you need to be on the lookout for them. They can completely change whether or not you can afford a home. The rule of thumb you want to keep in mind is the more amenities a community has, the more you can expect to have a PID to pay for them. So these are often like $100, $200 a month or more. So you have to factor that into your monthly payment. The amount of house you can afford in a PID neighborhood will be a lot less than what you can afford in a non-PID neighborhood. You also have the wild card of MUDs in Dallas. We are talking here about municipal utility districts, okay? MUDs can be a little less painful to the pocketbook than PIDs, but not often. A MUD typically happens essentially like due to urban sprawl. It's when a new community is located outside of city limits. The city doesn't provide the water and sewer out there, so you need an entity that will. So this generally means the home won't be subject to city taxes, so you do have an offset there in your budget. Now, of course, you'd like to think it would be, like a dollar for dollar offset, but honestly, it's usually not. Just having a community within a MUD can cost you hundreds more a month. For example, in McKinney, if you compare two of their popular communities, Painted Tree and Trinity Falls is located in 2 MUDs, and it'll cost you $325 more a month to live there for the same priced house. You're going to be able to afford much less house in Trinity Falls than you will in Painted Tree. Now, I wish I could say it stopped there, but unfortunately, there are a variety of other expenses you might run into in Dallas, okay? We're talking things like MMDs, municipal management districts, or PUDs, planned unit developments. So basically, when buying a house in Dallas, you need to assume that your house payment could include layers upon layers of added costs. What you can afford in a house can be vastly different. And gone are the days of the simple neighborhoods of row upon row of houses. You have to consider all of these layers of expenses before buying. Another thing that just doesn't hold true in Dallas anymore, okay, here it is, owning a home isn't cheaper than renting. When we bought our first house in the 90s, all right, we could afford a tiny 1-bedroom apartment for the same price as a full 3-bedroom, 2-bath home. Like, you could get so much more for your money back then because owning was cheaper than renting. And fast forward to the early 2000s, and we were able to buy dozens of rentals that brought in a ton of cash flow because still owning was cheaper than buying. In a healthy housing market, that's how it should be. Ownership should be encouraged. In fact, I'd even say this is a hallmark of a healthy housing market. On the other side, a sign of a housing bubble is when it's more expensive to own than to rent. The International Monetary Fund talks about this exact issue. They explain that the house price to rent ratio shows how much investors are willing to pay for each dollar of rent generated by a property. In other words, it measures how far home prices have stretched beyond what those homes could realistically earn in rent. And here's an important note, okay? The IMF points out that when house prices significantly exceed rents, buyers may opt to rent instead, which can quickly cool demand and prompt a price correction. It continues, this ratio serves as a long-term anchor for housing market profitability. But if it continues to rise at an explosive pace, it may indicate that house prices are being driven by speculative expectations rather than underlying fundamentals. When people talk about the Dallas housing market being overpriced, many times this is one of the metrics they're using, that renting is just plain cheaper than owning. And the rental market has really changed overall in Dallas, okay? So we should talk about that too. Back in the early 2000s, rentals were usually owned by hundreds and hundreds of all of these mom and pop landlords. Like, rentals cash flowed back then and credit was easy, so a lot of individuals were buying rentals. Plus, you had books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad inspiring everyone to get into buying rentals. Tenants could expect a more personalized, casual, interactive experience. And if you're thinking of renting first before buying in Dallas, you might be expecting that. Like, your landlord was an individual who would take your call if your AC broke. But now renting is a completely different experience. If you're moving to Dallas and planning to rent first, okay, you need to be prepared for this. The day of mom and pop landlords is largely a thing of the past. Now it has become like a corporate machine, okay? Highly institutionalized and completely impersonal. The application process is frustrating. It's almost impossible to reach a real person and get a straight answer. There's no clear way to know where you stand, whether your lease application is approved or not. And then after you've moved in, when it comes to requesting repairs, okay, it is just as impersonal. Like, most of the time, you're filling out a form online, never talking to a human, and just hoping that your repair request doesn't get lost somewhere in cyberspace. In fact, I hate to say this, but if you find yourself with a different experience, you're honestly probably dealing with fraud. Like, if you reach out through platforms like Facebook Marketplace, you may get an individual. And you may like, that it's a more personalized experience, but you need to know, again, I hate to say it, but this is usually fraud. Like, you'll have a person who's super friendly, who probably has a sob story or an unexpected life event, and they'll probably be charging below market rents. And it's like, we want to believe there's good left in the world, right? Or in Dallas anyway. Like, we want that personal connection, okay? Well, guess what? This is probably fraud. There are classic signs to watch out for. First, expect the emotional backstory. Like you're going to see them pop up on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist. And usually it's going to be like, my mother-in-law just went into a nursing home and we need to lease her home fast. Okay, don't fall for that. All right, that is a classic scam line. Also, the rent, again, is probably going to be, shockingly affordable. So please believe me when I say these too good to be true deals are usually scams. And of course, your trifecta will be when they ask for money to change hands. So bottom line here, these scammers are clever, and the best way to avoid them is to stick with MLS listings and work with a licensed agent who can verify everything for you. And unfortunately, that's going to mean you're a cog within a giant industrialized renting machine because, again, those mom and pop days of renting, unfortunately, they really are over in Dallas. Now, another big change in today's housing market is that getting a good deal has nothing to do with a discounted list price. Back in the day, when you spoke with a home builder, they played it straight with you. If there was an incentive, it would be small and clearly realistic. Sometimes there was no incentive at all and the price was just what it should be, a market-supported price. But now that has completely changed in Dallas. Builders nowadays take advantage of Texas being a non-disclosure state. They shift prices wildly by raising them super high and then showing huge price discounts just to draw buyers in. Or they'll offer these unbelievable incentives, such as $100,000 to be used any way you want it, closing costs, rate buy downs, upgrades, and on and on. But the list price is still way higher than the market supports. The thing is, we have a slower housing market now and builders are more motivated. So they take advantage of psychological tricks and they do everything they can to make you think you're getting an unbelievable deal. Now, this was unheard of. Even as early as the early 2020s, they just didn't have to offer incentives then, right? We had a raging seller's market with a housing shortage. But now it is a completely different story. I have had buyers ask me where they can get the best deals off list price, whether cash buyers or just buyers looking for a good deal. But I always tell them they're asking the wrong question, okay? Because it is no longer about getting a good deal off the list price, okay? There's just so much more to it now. It's just become so much more convoluted than that. Now you have to strongly lean on the comparative market analysis to see what the list price should be in the first place. It is vital you have this information before you ever even think about negotiating, because you may negotiate to like $20,000 less than the asking price, but you're still paying $40,000 more than you really should be. Nowadays, it has gotten almost ridiculous, okay, to where the builders are just outdoing one another on these outlandish price discounts and incentives. I mean, the discounts, they just keep getting bigger and bigger. The market analysis helps you see through all of this smoke and mirrors and get down to what the list price actually should be. The thing is, and this is important to know, all right, you are not going to be able to do this on your own, all right, because Texas doesn't allow sales prices to be disclosed. You are going to need a licensed professional such as a realtor or appraiser to get that information for you. So basically just know that pricing in the current new construction market is a lot of smoke and mirrors. It isn't what it seems, and you can no longer trust a list price to be any indication of what the list price actually should be. Speaking of new construction, that brings me to my next point, okay? Warranties on new construction are not as good as they used to be. A lot of people are drawn towards new construction for the warranty, right? The idea of a brand new home with a warranty to back it up, that's a good one. But it doesn't always work out the way you would hope. If you've heard anything about Dallas, you probably have heard that we are notorious for foundation problems. Back in the day, new construction was required to provide a 10-year warranty on the structural integrity of the home. And this specifically references back to the Texas Civil Practice and Remedies Code called the Statute of Repose. So basically, it required builders to provide that 10-year warranty. But now Texas legislation has changed. The repose was amended to, among other things, shorten the time period from 10 years to 6 years. So you need to know that many builders, many of them, are still offering the standard 1 to 10 warranty that buyers would like to see. But, okay, there are plenty of builders who aren't. So we can't say that the 1 to 10 is the norm. And that is a big deal because foundation problems are typically going to run you like $15,000, $20,000 or more. So this is something you really want to be mindful of and take into consideration when pricing a builder. Don't assume that every builder warranty is the same, because they definitely aren't. Okay, here is a biggie that was just passed this year. It is hot off the press, coming straight out of the Texas legislature. All right, zoning will be far more lax going into the future in Dallas. First, let's talk about NIMBY. Now, if you haven't heard that word before, NIMBY means not in my backyard. And this is tied to a major shift in Texas housing that literally just came out of the legislature. So if you're looking at a home that backs to or overlooks a green space, okay, you need to pay close attention. Texas wants more affordable housing, so along comes House Bill 24. In practice, it limits neighborhood input on what gets built, okay? So hence the phrase NIMBY. All right, try to picture this, okay? Picture a community with wide lots, mature trees, and then owners who take pride in their homes, okay? Then imagine a proposal to squeeze in like 200 houses on 30-foot lots with no cap on rentals. It used to be that neighbors could rally signatures and attend council meetings with their petition to stop projects like these. Like, this has happened multiple times in my own neighborhood, when developers tried to squeeze dense housing into adjacent land. But under the new law, Texas raised the bar. The protest threshold for zoning changes jumped from 20% of adjacent landowners to 60%, making it far harder for a small group of homeowners to block a proposal. That's not all Texas has been changing, though. Senate Bill 15 also passed. The new law bars cities from requiring lots larger than 3,000 square foot in new developments over 5 acres. It also requires cities to allow homes with at least 3 stories, each with 10-foot floor heights. All right, so taken together, these changes absolutely weaken a neighborhood's voice, as well as limit a city's ability to enforce larger lot sizes. So the setup you see in neighborhoods right now, developers have the green light to change. They can be far more densely packed in with nearby neighbors, losing a lot of their voice to protest that. So for that reason, I highly recommend you think twice before buying a home next to open green space. All right, make sure you know who owns that green space. Like, is it HOA owned and permanently designated, or is it held by a third party? Because if it is not truly protected, you need to know that today's developers just got a whole lot more power. So 6 things that used to be true aren't anymore. But here's the strange part. The numbers don't match the story in Dallas right now either. Prices are rising in places they shouldn't and falling where they shouldn't. So we can't even say that that part of the Dallas market is still true. Now, if you want to know more about the shift I'm talking about here, I break it all down in this video, which you may want to watch next. Now, in the meantime, this is Wendy Pinnell, your Dallas realtor and broker, and I'll see you on the next video.